I've heard a lot of people complain about The Great Gatsby, probably because they don't get it. I'm talking about teachers, writers, intellectuals. But if you don't like The Great Gatsby, you're not an intellectual, you don't get it, and you don't know anything about literature. So here's a tweet that triggered me, posted on X today, from Brad Torgerson, who is a sci-fi writer. Quote, arguably one of the worst books to be selected by America's high schools to enshrine as a, quote, must-read in various English classes, it did not age well past its era nor its East Coast audience. I never thought of The Great Gatsby as appealing to a particular region, like it's only for people on the East Coast, although it does take place on Long Island. I, of course, know Long Island fairly well, but I didn't really find that relevant to the particular setting of The Great Gatsby. The problems and people are all tedious. They're not tedious, you just missed it. The equivalent of modern Martha's Vineyard folk having a soap opera episode. No. Because F. Scott Fitzgerald was a genius, and he created a great work of literature which has not been paralleled, I don't think, in like 50 years, or when's the last book that's as good as The Great Gatsby? About which almost no middle-class kid can care, to say nothing of poor kids. I hate this book. It deserves to be deselected from the academic canon. Wow. I mean, I enjoyed The Great Gatsby as a teenager. I'm proud that I was able to connect with it because I'm not really proud of that much that I did as a teenager. But it was, it was kind of around the house in my brother's bookcase or my father's. And so I was not an aristocrat. I did not have any connection to the social milieu of The Great Gatsby. It's also pretty ironic to claim that Gatsby is only accessible to kids who are middle class or upper middle class, given that one of the themes of The Great Gatsby is social class. Namely, Jay Gatsby is aspiring and striving to get into the upper class, and that's why he pretends that he went to Oxford with that picture he carries around. So you're kind of missing the point if you say that this book excludes, certain kids of limited means, given that that's kind of the whole point. This American phenomenon of aspiring so desperately to get into the next social class, and how that which is the American dream can sometimes become a nightmare. It's the characters, it's the writing, it's beautiful. And if you don't get it, that's okay, but that just means that as they say, you're, quote, telling on yourself that you don't understand literature. He implies that poor kids won't get it. I mean, maybe, I'm not saying, to say that this is a great novel is indisputable. That's not even up for debate. But that doesn't mean everyone's going to enjoy it, because if you're someone that doesn't like to read, you're not going to like The Great Gatsby. You'll probably like it less because it's kind of a difficult read. So I will grant that. But you just have to be a good reader. You have to be able to understand complex writing. That's really the thing. Even though the guy that made this tweet is a professional writer, that doesn't mean that he really gets real literature, because there's a big gap between real literature and popular fiction. No offense. And someone responded to this and he said, I remember a quote from Hemingway that was along the lines that this book could have been so much better if Fitzgerald didn't so obviously want to be one of the people in it, and that he obviously worshipped that class. So I'm not familiar with that Hemingway quote, but I had to correct him because Hemingway loved The Great Gatsby. Ernest Hemingway thought The Great Gatsby was great. His take on it was F. Scott Fitzgerald was a very flawed human being, alcoholic, weird, crazy wife, lots of problems. But Hemingway said, if he can write a book this excellent, we have to have a lot of tolerance for all his other problems. So, yeah, fact check, Hemingway loved The Great Gatsby, a friend of F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I know that from A Movable Feast, which is a Hemingway book, kind of sketches he wrote about his time in Paris, and F. Scott Fitzgerald is featured in a lot of those chapters. Published posthumously, so who knows what Hemingway wanted to do with A Movable Feast, but it's one of my favorite Hemingway books, and The Great Gatsby is one of my favorite novels, period. Read it many times. I think I read it in high school. I don't remember. I read it when I was in high school. I don't remember if I read it in the class of high school. But, like people that complain about novels, like I get it. I feel you. I remember reading Shakespeare in high school and thinking, I don't understand it. I don't like it. What is happening? But that doesn't mean that Shakespeare's not a good writer, because the high school version of myself did not enjoy it. So I at least have the humility to know that. Now I love Shakespeare and I've read like 20 of his plays. So if you find yourself not liking The Great Gatsby, take a step back and ask, maybe am I the problem?